Podcasters Roundtable, round 43, podcast jargon. So before we even start, I want the chat room, everyone here participating live. Hopefully you hear this. There's like this sort of delay where I hit live and the chat room actually sees the video. So maybe I should delay this for a second. Let's start off, instead of saying what I was going to say, if you're in the chat room, throw in your podcast jargon words and or terms there, right? It can be a word or a term, and we're going to define what jargon is here in a second. But Adam Tinkoff in the chat is already killing it. I think I've written like 3 of his down, so cool, and we're gonna dive into that. So let me define it, and then we'll meet the roundtable. So what is jargon? So as defined by the Googles, it's special words or expressions that are used by a particular profession or group and are difficult for others to understand. I think oftentimes people would describe podcasting as difficult to understand. So a common problem for podcasting that we're always working to overcome, and podcasting is just becoming easier and easier, I think, every year. And this year, it's the year of podcasting. Don't we hear that like every year? But anyways, let's meet the roundtable. A little different today. It's I am the host, but there is no official co-host. Daniel and Dave are both out, so not a problem. We have very capable roundtablers, and I think, let's see, 2 new ones and 2 regulars. Or maybe Crystal's not quite a regular, but maybe she will be. So mentioning that, welcome Crystal to the roundtable.
Hi, I'm Crystal O'Connor. I work for Libsyn.com, a podcast host, and I'm a personal podcaster as well. Glad to be here.
Thanks, and definitely last minute. If you know me, if you know the roundtable, I'm pretty last minute. And Daniel texted, said he couldn't make it last minute. I sent out an email. Crystal had signed up. This is a good thing to put out there. Crystal had signed up, said she was going to watch live, so she's able to. I realize not everyone can because of schedules, but I went out to the chat and I said, "Who's out there who I know has good podcasting experience?" Crystal certainly must deal with jargon every day in her job at Libsyn. Yeah, not at all. And so she was able to jump on straight off the treadmill and help us out. So that was pretty awesome. And so next, over from Crystal, brand new roundtable. Welcome to the roundtable, Lloyd.
Hello. Well, thanks for having me. I've been watching it for a while, so it's kind of nice to grab a seat on the roundtable. My name is Lloyd Hannesson. I run VGPodcast.com, just a small network of shows that I run. I also host shows over at DisneyInfinity.tv, which is a site all about Disney's new game. I'm a bit of a video game nut, and I've been podcasting for almost 10 years about them. So it's been a fun hobby.
Yeah, I can see that. I see the Game Boy back there. I had that. That was like a big purchase for me. I think my first job when I was like 16, one of my first paychecks, that Game Boy. That exact one. You actually bought it off me on eBay, and that's not true.
Yeah. So old classics. I have to have the nerdery behind me.
Yes.
Expected, I guess. I don't know. So
that's a pretty standard podcast studio, right? Podcaster, you got exceptional setup. You got a nice microphone. You know what you're doing, but you've got the required tech nerd stuff behind you. So
that's collectors behind the
collectors. I know you got to show that stuff off. Now we can show it off to more people. Before it was just whoever came over to our house, right?
That's right.
That's awesome. All right, so returning roundtable. I was actually trying to count how many roundtables he's been on, because it's getting dangerously close to the 10 number. But Nick, welcome back to the roundtable.
Hey, thanks for having me, Ray. Yes, my wet hair. I rushed up to the shower just so I could look pretty for you and your audience here on the roundtable. I'm Nick Sirling, host of Inside the Jungle over at spnt.tv, a podcast about the awesome Bengals.
I appreciate that. I don't know if I'd go so far as saying pretty, but we really appreciate that you got clean for the internet. Yeah.
Yes, as clean as I could.
That's right, because you smell beautiful through the webs.
Oh, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you very much.
And on the end, another long-time roundtable viewer. I've talked to him online several times. Actually, maybe Skype a little bit, but welcome to your first roundtable, Richard.
Thank you very much, Ray. Yes, it's a pleasure. It's an honor. First time on Roundtable. My name's Richard Farrar, and I've got a blog which is imaginatively titled richardfarrar.com, and I also podcast on a gardening website that I run called plantadvice.co.uk.
Very cool. Yeah, we're all kind of our own brands these days, right? You're producing content and people starting to know your name, right? So, hey,
yeah.
if you can get that .com with your own name, that's a good thing to get. You gotta get that.
That's a bit spooky, isn't it? Yes.
Yeah. So Richard, where are you coming from? Where you tuning in from?
I'm in the UK in a little village in Cambridgeshire.
Right. So it is just turned tomorrow. So you are in the future, right?
Yeah, I am in the future. Yes.
That's from my perspective. For some people, and you're in the past. So that's the beauty of podcasting. It's global.
It caused a bit of confusion this afternoon with email. When you said tomorrow, I'm thinking, well, which tomorrow are we talking about? Your tomorrow or my tomorrow? There's a date line there somewhere in the middle.
I know, and in the description for these things, I always put like GMT, right? Greenwich Mean Time. Try to speaking some type of world language. But there's GMT might be a podcast. It's not specific to podcast, but it might be some jargon because you're like, what is that? You have to learn about different things like that when you're speaking to the world. So, all right. Well, thanks everyone. Again, I did. Well, actually, let me remind people to go to podcastersroundtable.com. And sign up there, right? Get on the list and fill out the form that will, once you sign up to the list, you get this form. It says, what do you want to talk about on the roundtable? And I know you're out there, and I can get you on to one of these roundtables. Again, like Richard, he's been on the list for a long time. And this episode or this round is not necessarily specific to what anyone signed up for, but I actually chose by podcasters who have deep enough experience that they've certainly come across plenty of these jargon words. And in fact, I don't know who has the deepest experience. When you come up with your first jargon word, maybe toss out how many years you've been podcasting, because that's always fun. We'll see who the rookie is, right? A rookie in this group might be 4 years or something. So very cool. And let's dive in. I have listed here the first word. I have podcast ? Is podcast jargon, right? Do we have to define that? Well, we used to have to define it, right? When you said, have you listened to a podcast, you get a reaction like, a what? Are we past that now? Do you think this group's a little tough to tell? Who said?
No, I don't think so.
All right.
I think there's a lot of people out there that you do still have to explain it. An internet radio show is probably the closest you get to Joe Public. Is not technically familiar with it, but no, I don't think it's ubiquitous by any stretch of the imagination.
Okay, and by being bold, Richard, by stepping out and saying no, you get to then define it for us,
okay,
which is always fun.
Okay, podcast, I would define technically, podcast is a portmanteau, which is a posh word of sticking two words together, of two words, which is iPod and broadcast, because it was used for the old iPods, and a broadcast, which is disseminating information in various forms. So yeah, podcast is a portmanteau of two words, iPod and broadcast.
Awesome. And Crystal, do you think you can add a little bit to the technical aspect of that definition?
We usually like to say episodic content, so content released in a serialized fashion, and that's kind of when you start getting into RSS feeds and so forth, and I'm sure that's more jargon we'll get into, but episodic content released on a quasi-regular basis.
Yeah, I myself, I don't know if my video is going crazy, but it did freeze at a weird moment there. Are you guys seeing blank screen from me?
I am.
I'm seeing a water glass for you.
Yeah. Is it frozen on that frame where my eyes are crazy? That's crazy. All right, crazy eyes. I'm gonna freeze it on Crystal then. I can actually
I'll play with my monitor.
You're welcome. Maybe I can fix my camera. But I love that you said episodic, because that's the part that I focus in on that a lot of people actually don't include in their definition. That's one of my favorite parts of the definition, because I feel like it does need to be sort of a series, right? I think it's an ongoing story that you start, whether it's the same story 2 years down the road or 4 years down the road. It is this timeline of your timeline, right? Your podcast journey. So I enjoy the episodic part of that. So that was a good shout out for the episodic part. And yes, requiring an RSS feed, which again itself is another jargon word.
Well, and can I just say my mom still has no idea what it is that I do for a living?
Isn't that fun to explain when you work
so when
in
you're talking
podcasting?
about podcasts, I can't say, "Oh, I work for a podcast host." It's like, huh? So I tell people, as earlier mentioned, I say internet radio.
Yeah, no, I love. Oops. Hopefully, I'm still
We
in
can
touch.
hear you.
Okay, good. I'm getting the pinwheel of death. I'm getting all kinds of fun trouble, live problems here. But yeah, it's fun when you work in the podcasting space to then maybe ask a relative, "Hey, what do I do, Dad? What do I do for a living?" Go ahead and explain that. So I just tell them I work in video or something like that. Let me see here. I did mention the technical part of podcasting is an RSS feed. So, Lloyd, do you think you can tell us what an RSS feed is?
Sure, yeah. Well, RSS feeds really started in blogging, and it was just a way to syndicate content to other people. So you could use a feed reader to subscribe to someone's blog posts. And there's been other things that have been added to it for podcasting. So there's enclosures and other jargony type things, but it's really the workhorse that powers what podcasting is, the ability to create something and then have it sent out to people when it's available or whenever they request it.
Very cool. And let's see, if we're talking about, terms and then how they affect podcasters, I mean, you have to have, I think we've kind of already defined the fact that you have to have an RSS feed to have a podcast, correct?
Yep.
Okay, so how do you create your RSS feed? Or, wait, you're supposed to say when you started podcasting.
When I started podcasting,
No, how many years ago? Sorry.
I started podcasting it'll be 10 years in
Wow.
April.
10 years.
Yeah, I'm going to have to do something for that, I guess. Even though the show's not around anymore, although I did use Libsyn at the time, so it's kind of funny. I might have to put a special episode out because of that 10-year anniversary.
Very cool. And so that's perfect then. Then when you started, how were you creating an RSS feed?
When I first started, I was coding everything by hand,
Yeah.
my web pages and the RSS feeds, and then I moved to, I think it was movable type, and then I moved to WordPress, which is what I use now.
Very cool. Yeah, it's gotten a lot easier over the years than it used to be. And as you can see, as I'm fumbling through my camera settings, I'm trying to get back into the Hangout, but all I'm seeing are pinwheels and freezing frames. But yeah, so let's see, Nick, how long ago did you start podcasting?
Yeah, 10 years ago myself. August 2005 was the first podcast I released.
I don't think I knew that.
Just like Lloyd, I was doing it using my own website and XML file, and then I used FeedBurner to convert it to an RSS feed. And then that show lasted 7 episodes.
Nice.
So, and then a couple years later, I started to get back into the swing of things of podcasting. I also did movable type. And now that I'm on WordPress, man, movable type was not fun at all. But WordPress is the way I go now, and that's the way I use my RSS.
Very cool. So as a new podcaster, Crystal can probably add to this. Richard, what would be your suggestion for a new podcaster now that we know what an RSS feed is, how does a new podcaster get one, in your opinion?
Simplest way, I think most people will probably echo this, would be to use WordPress, and then the plugin, the Blueberry plugin, which we all seem to use and recommend. That's by far the simplest and least painful way of doing it, I think.
I actually don't think it's the simplest. I think actually Crystal would probably argue with Blueberry being the best option, but this is perfect because this is what we want. We want two sides of the story. I actually think that Libsyn would probably be the easiest way. I think Crystal would agree with that, but tell us why, Crystal, you think maybe using your host like Libsyn would be the easiest. And this is dangerous category, right?
Yeah, you could do an entire podcasters roundtable on this, and I want to say that you have in the past. but yeah, Libsyn, I actually have a getting started guide up on YouTube that you literally start with nothing, and 20 minutes later you've submitted your show to iTunes that quick. You don't have to know what an RSS feed is. You just go in and fill out the fields, and it's in iTunes. But in all honesty, I'm not going to knock using something like Blueberry. If you're familiar with WordPress and you're already in there, a lot of our producers actually host their content with us and use Blueberry. I prefer you use the Libsyn feed, and I say that not just as an employee, because I watch WordPress sites break so frequently because of a bad plugin or a hack, or you're on a shared server and somebody else's site acts up, things like that, and that ends up affecting your feed. But really, both are perfectly viable ways of going about it.
I can hear Daniel screaming, "Own your feed!"
Well, I don't. You can own your feed with Libsyn. I don't buy into that argument. I buy into that argument with some hosts, but Libsyn kind of prides themselves on always providing full ability to manipulate and move your feed in any way, shape, or form, and it will always be true at Libsyn. So
yeah, and I think that is the key, and that's where I said it's sort of like a dangerous topic, because I think new podcaster would hear you and say, "Oh, that's amazing. I'm going to do that. I'm already at Blog Talk Radio, so I'm going to submit." And you're like, whoa, wait a minute, right? This doesn't apply. Just because your service may allow you to create a feed in its back end and simply submit to iTunes is not necessarily the best thing. So this is specific to, I would say, Libsyn. And, actually, what is the criteria you would say for if you were to let your host create your feed? What are you looking out for? And you kind of already alluded to that.
Are you asking me?
Yeah.
Well, the first and foremost, most important thing is that the host will allow you to move your feed away. At any given point in time. You should always be able to move your feed away. The feed should be valid and meet iTunes specifications. I also advocate that iTunes is not the only place your podcast can or should live, but pretty much everybody else follows iTunes specifications. So make sure that feed follows iTunes specifications. Those are the two top things you need to look for.
Yeah, and I agree. I mean, also WordPress is easy, and it is one of the ways. I use both methods. I use Libsyn only for a feed. I use Libsyn in combination with WordPress in PowerPress, and so there are definitely a couple different ways to do it, and everyone's doing different. Anyone else doing their RSS feed? Well, Lloyd, you mentioned WordPress, but I think it's probably through Blueberry, I imagine, or PowerPress, maybe not Blueberry. Yeah, and so that's probably, so I think what's the key to both of these systems being so easy? Lloyd, what do you think? Why do you use PowerPress?
Because I don't want to do it by hand anymore.
No, that's a good reason.
The automated adding everything to the feed. I used to use FeedBurner to basically create an
ding. Hey, Nick, do you have like a little bell sound effect? I feel like every time there's a jargon word, I want to hear a bell go ding because he just hit another one. We're going to cover that. So go ahead, finish that thought, and we're going to cover that one.
Sure. Yeah. No, I used to use FeedBurner for to take a plain RSS feed and turn it into one that had all the podcasting elements that iTunes or other podcatchers. Waiting for a bell.
Ding.
when they grab down the feed. Now, like, PowerPress just works. I used to use one prior to PowerPress, and PowerPress has kind of evolved to be the winner in the space for a WordPress blogger anyway. It does all of the stuff. And it's even nicer for a site like mine where I have 5 or 6 podcasts hosted. I can have different feeds, all feeding from one blog. It just makes my life a very happy life compared to what
I definitely. I think especially if you got your hands down in the dirt there, and you are doing something like a network, or you're doing something more complex, WordPress and PowerPress can give you a lot of cool functionality. If you're a podcaster who's just starting and says, I need to get this up there, I actually don't care about the tech too much. You said RSS feed, sure, whatever. I know I need that. Submit. Libsyn can make that very easy for you, and I think they're both extremely. I think they're both powerful, and I think they're both viable. Beyond that, I haven't played around too much. I did hand code as well in the past, and so glad that I don't have to do that anymore.
Is Blogspot still around?
Blogspot. I was, maybe Blogger. You're talking about?
Yeah,
Why?
That's how I started when I wanted to do my show previously called Who Day Weekly, now Inside the Jungle. I started off as I was using Blogspot, Blogger.
but with FeedBurner probably.
Correct. I was using FeedBurner, but it was still a free blog option that allowed me to have RSS I just needed to figure out a way to host my files.
Well, and that's the key is that FeedBurner. So FeedBurner is not something that we really that is needed anymore. FeedBurner gave you those iTunes tags, right? Blogspot would not do that. You can get RSS feed, but you could not then get those tags that iTunes wanted, and that's why so many of us used FeedBurner. Now it's still alive. You can still use it, and I think maybe we can for now. Who knows? There's no telling. But I'm going to do something fun and leave the Hangout. I'm going to try to rescue my video. So there is no co-host. So I'm tossing it out to you guys to keep the conversation going. We're going to go with FeedBurner. Nick, if you want to tell us maybe what FeedBurner is, what you were using it for. I kind of alluded to that as well, but why you left, and then hopefully I will be back. But yes, you guys jump in, talk about FeedBurner, let's define it, and then tell us how it's affecting podcasters currently, because a lot of people they're caught in that I want to make a transition, right, from off of FeedBurner maybe because they're worried. Maybe Chris will talk a little bit about why maybe people are concerned about FeedBurner. So I will be right back, I hope, and good luck, you guys.
All right. Well, Lloyd actually touched on FeedBurner quite a bit a minute ago. I was using it to make my feed able to be used in iTunes, Stitcher Smart Radio, all the different podcasting directories, mainly through the SmartCast feature inside of FeedBurner, which, again, like Ray said, allows you to put your show categories in there, any kind of keywords. I moved away from it personally because there was this fear around the podcasting circles that there was the potential that Google might be eliminating that portion of their, I don't know if you want to call it their business. We saw Google Reader go away, which I was a big fan of, and so everybody kind of thought, well, what's next? And so rather than deal with that later, I just went ahead and I was proactive, and I moved all of my feeds to a PowerPress through PowerPress in my WordPress blog. So that's the way I handle FeedBurner. Am I missing anything, Lloyd?
No, that's pretty much it. The reason why I switched to FeedBurner initially was because it was the easy way. The SmartCast was great. And then I moved away from FeedBurner back to my blog. And then I got a nasty note from my blog host that I was using too much bandwidth. And it wasn't because of the files. It was because of the RSS feed being so large. So I moved back to FeedBurner for a while just to I don't know, get rid of some of that pressure on my host. But I don't see a need for it anymore unless you're someone that likes to move your blog around from place to place and you want to have one feed that is safe to give to iTunes without having to use the redirect part of the RSS feed. But yeah, FeedBurner was great. But like you said, Nick, when Google Reader shut down, I kind of panicked. It's like, okay, what other Google services am I relying on that now could be taken away from me? So I kind of switched away from FeedBurner. It was great for what it was, but now blog, WordPress, Libsyn is great, as Crystal would attest to.
Well, FeedBurner lately has also been having problems with their SmartCast, and also if you have their stats turned on where the files just simply won't work properly out of the podcasting app in iOS. So if you want your show available using the iOS baked-in podcast app and you have stats turned on through FeedBurner, you have SmartCast turned on through FeedBurner, your episodes won't actually work consistently. So we actually get a lot of tickets from people saying, hey, my show's not working anymore in the podcast app. What's going on? Almost every single time it's because they've got SmartCast and or stats turned on inside FeedBurner. There are specific technical reasons for that, but we've been pushing pretty hard for people to, whether it's to use Libsyn's feed or Blueberry's feed or something other than FeedBurner for that reason.
Richard, how about you? Are you using FeedBurner? What are you using for your RSS?
On my own blog, I use the Blueberry plugin. On the Plant Advice website, I've actually hard-coded. It's an old website I developed myself, so everything in that website is hard-coded. The XML feed, the RSS feed, is hard-coded, but it's generated from PHP, from the database and stuff. I have used FeedBurner, but I've only ever used it. I think I use FeedBurner primarily so I get people to sign up to my feed via email. I never ever have used it for podcasts. I've always submitted a podcast of a feed I control myself, as other people have echoed.
Awesome. Yeah, I don't know how much more we can really go into FeedBurner. Should we transition to a new
Well, I've got an
jargon
idea.
thing, or am I missing anything?
Well, there was a something Ray mentioned leading up to FeedBurner. He mentioned the word tags. Now, there's a common thing, ID3 tags. We probably all know about ID3 tags. Can you explain those, Nick?
Oh, you brought it up. Feel free, Richard.
Okay. Right, podcasts, essentially we all use MP3s. Everyone's heard of MP3s. Now, ID3 tags are something called metadata. Now, metadata is, the posh word is data about data. So you've got the main track, the MP3 file, that's got all your data in. The data about the data are little tags you add into it, which your MP3 player can read, and these tags can give you things like the artist name, the year, the episode, and you can even embed your album art into it. So when it gets played on an MP3 player or on your computer, it will display your album art and the show title and episode number, etc. Is that right?
That's exactly right.
Yep.
Lloyd,
Yeah,
have you ever come across a podcast that doesn't have ID3 tags and you just kind of shake your head?
Yeah, I've put up a couple episodes without tags because it was like 2 in the morning and bleary-eyed, and I just want to get the show